Hello, welcome. Today I am joined by Simon Dickinson. And Simon, you are the first orthotist and a consultant one at that I've ever had on the podcast. So thank you for joining.
Thanks a lot. No problems.
So just for my benefit as well, can you just talk to me about what is an orthotist?
Oof. Okay.
Short reply.
Short reply. An orthotist is somebody who assesses a patient and provides them with a device and sometimes other things that either helps them move better, helps them be more stable, or protects them from injury. So the old definition of an orthosis was support, protect, correct, and that's outdated now. But basically, it's a medical device that's worn. An orthosis is a medical device that's worn, and it goes from the top of your head to the tip of your toe. So, as an orthotist, I would deal with scoliosis in children who may have a neurological condition or they may not. I would deal with somebody with knee arthritis. I could deal with somebody who is paralyzed in one leg. I could deal with a child with cerebral palsy who has issues with their legs or their arms. I could deal with an adult with foot and ankle pain. So orthotics is sometimes used in different professions to loosely, I would say. And I think sometimes people talk about orthotics and they mean insoles. They mean foot orthoses. But fundamentally, I'm trained to prescribe an orthosis for any part of the body. And that's, I suppose, the core treatment of orthotics. So the training is prosthetics and orthotics. So prosthetics, artificial limbs that replace the function of the lost limb, and orthosis, trying to support an existing limb to make it function better or be safer or be more comfortable or reduce risk, is probably a more accurate definition.
Okay, that's interesting. I was at OSSA HQ last week. So is that the sort of
Yeah,
what they
so
do?
OSSA are a prosthetics and orthotics company. They're a big international company, known in the world of orthotics mainly for knees and probably secondary for spines. You'll find different organizations specialize in different things. But yeah, OSSA are a prosthetic and orthotic company who are global, and they make components or devices that patients use or are built into something that is used. They've recently acquired a joint company from Germany who make beautiful joints that can go into long leg calipers and things like that to try to improve people who have got significant issues with their legs and need lots of help.
Right. Oh yeah. No, that's really interesting. I think we did some work because I think it's back in the day for me, we did some work with Strathclyde University in Salford, I think, that
Yep.
were
They're the two.
involved in that area.
They're the two long-standing P&O schools. There's now a conversion degree at Keele University, which is technically a master's program, but it basically takes people who have got another qualification or another degree, and it allows them to convert and become prosthetists and orthotists. And there's an apprenticeship program running now at Derby University, which is they've just had their first cohort graduate and officially qualify this year, which is a great thing. So really small profession that overlaps with lots of other professions. But that I think the thing most people would think about an orthotist in the UK certainly is their role in footwear and in the use of lower limb braces and splints, because that's probably 40 to 50%, including insoles, footwear, AFOs. That's probably 50% of most orthotists' workload.
Yeah, that's what we see most like out there. Where we sell medical devices and technology and so on. So that's the space that I work in, and we see a load of things in that area. How do you like? What's your perspective on tech that's coming into it? We're seeing loads more in the private market now. It's really exploding. How do you you've got all these companies like us going out saying you've got
Yeah.
these products and all of that. How do you cut through that stuff and think, right, is this stuff clinically going to work? And then how do you even get your team to use it? All of these things. What's your advice around that stuff?
So tech. So I think you've got two things really. I think you could split tech into probably two things, maybe three coming up with AI, but dealing with tech in terms of product and the manufacture of product. There are components in orthoses now. Orthoses are often quite simple devices at first glance. There are now some massive strides being taken in orthotics finally, where you can put ankle joints on devices and powered knee devices, where you can actually replicate the function of a muscle or allow a segment to move in a controlled way, rather than either it moving it freely or not at all, or stiffening a device to make it move. So there's significant improvements in technology with componentry. The challenge is embedding that into the NHS system, where a lot of devices are, because they come at a significant cost, and orthotics is funded inconsistently throughout the UK, is probably the kindest way of describing that. Prosthetic patients, if you're an amputee and you are born without a limb, you will have thousands of pounds spent on you regularly to provide you with a limb so you can function, and rightly so. But if you're a child with cerebral palsy who's born and you've got one side of your body that's paralyzed and you're hemiplegic, you are not afforded the same budgetary level of device. The variation in costs of those devices is massive, but fundamentally you've got an impaired limb on a child, and prosthetics gets a lot of funding and orthotics doesn't get anywhere near the same. In prosthetics, you would get 2 limbs, one for activity. You may get more depending upon what you do. In orthotics, a lot of services in the NHS only give you 1 device, and that's a big problem that many people have been trying to challenge for a long period of time. But in an NHS system that's under a lot of pressure at the moment, that's a hard challenge. So I think there are some massive advances in technology. There are some massive advances in 3D printing. There are long overdue advances coming down the road in material science and our understanding of material science, and how we apply that and how we make things and how we can design things differently to be smarter, better, longer, achieve more. That's great. And then I think you've got a whole load of other tools which are digital clinical assessment tools. So the obvious one is pressure assessment's been around for ages. Pressure assessment doesn't come without challenges, because some systems measure 1 step, and if you take somebody and you could measure them, you'd have to have the right system, like an instrumented treadmill or an in-shoe system. You got that person to take 40 steps, and you look individually at the technical data around any step, you will find that each step's a little bit different. So there's probably an average, there's probably an extreme of movement, motion, force in one direction, and there'll definitely be a lower range as well. So I think those systems can help as clinical tools. I think the challenge is, on their own, they're not diagnostic, because fundamentally, if you're going to have a system which is diagnostic, you have to almost have a yes-no function in the decision-making matrix, which means you have to have a reference point digitally, which would be, I call it a zero plane reference, which is basically what is average, what is expected, what is normal. And if you take 100 people to do 100 steps over the same speed, you will see 100 different pressure scans with variation in those steps. So pressure scans, cool. I think it gives us some information. I don't think it's used enough post-treatment. I think it's used in an assessment process. Patients certainly like the visuals of it, and I think that can improve compliance, and it can and that's always good, and allow better communication. I think it needs to be more used at the back end as well. So if you are going to use a device and get pressure assessment involved, then you should be validating that it's doing what you expect it to do, and hopefully clinicians will be able to predict what they expect that to happen. So that's that part. 3D scanning is really coming on. 3D modeling is really coming on. Gait analysis and kind of orthotic treatment around feet and ankles and technology is moving away from alignment and the traditional view from the back, looking at the whole body a little bit more, and maybe accepting variability a bit more. But I think the use of accelerometers, in particular, force gauges, force plates, understanding load and capacity variations within tissue based on given activities and injury profiles is vitally important, and I think a massive area for us to learn and get some more information so we got more consistent care. And I think the interesting thing is, moving down the road, is wearable technologies, which are on the way. Wearable technologies that exist in diabetic feet now, where they put temperature sensors inside insoles or socks, and if your feet start getting hot, an app tells you to slow down or sit down. Wearable technologies are really useful from a patient point of view, and I think that's where AI sits as well. But I think technology needs to be used with caution, and I think people need to be really understanding of where it sits and not be over reliant upon it, because fundamentally we're all different, and normal doesn't exist, but average probably does. But it's a bell curve of variation, and most of that variation's normal.
Yeah, no, I think you've made some really good points there. And even though we're a tech company, it's like I would hope that we as a company are honest about basically where this stuff fits, because I think you do hear a lot of things about, oh, this is gold standard, and that really frustrates me when that's mentioned in terms of that, because it's like, well, how do you define what that is, or companies throwing these things around? Because I remember working with 3D force plates and proper lab setups, and then you see new stuff coming on, and we've got a force plate which is a much more sort of user friendly but lower level in terms of data output. And it's like, well, this actually is way more relevant for a clinical setting than that. But that doesn't, what is gold standard? I think you need to define what you're actually
Yeah.
assessing things as.
I couldn't agree more, and I think you've also got to accept, and I don't think, and this is beginning to happen in research now, is that whenever you're using a force plate, you're using it in a sterile environment. The world is not flat, and we're only recently seeing research into how orthoses affect other activities other than walking in flat controlled environments. So Gabriel Moisan's just done a great paper on walking up and down steps and how different muscles work influenced by orthoses. So real world stuff is there. I think the key thing on technology is that it's relevant for the person you see and how that person evolves, but comparing technology easily from you to me, for example, Andy, we're different people. We've got different faces, we've got different profiles, we've got different development cycles. I used to be a much slimmer, athletic runner, sporty guy. Now I'm a middle-aged fat bloke and don't have the capacity to handle the load. But I clearly remember early on in my journey, I saw a Olympic champion runner lady, and you analyze her gait according to all the parameters I was taught in the 1990s, and this woman just had abnormal everywhere according to what was being used at the time. She was a bloody Olympic champion. And when you try to deal with that and reduce some of those thrusts and rotations that we were taught were abnormal, she lost her form. And I think sometimes the focus is on, what are we looking at here? And I think this is where the evolution has changed, is what's the problem? Not what do we think is the problem, but what is the actual problem and what can we actually influence? And is position or the amount someone moves, is that, I remember sitting in a physio with a member of the, a physio talk with a member of the British Olympic team, and he described this thing years ago, and I remember it stuck with me. It was, we need to make people move well, not perfectly, because perfect doesn't exist. Perfect is a theoretical model for people to learn to understand variation. We have to embrace variation and deal with individuals, I think, in a much more controlled way. And that can be challenging in a scientific world of evolving theory and paradigm and opinion. But I
Who
think
was that physio, if you're able to share it?
Ian Horsley.
Ian, yeah, good lads.
Ian, I think it was at a biomechanics summer school. It's got to be a few years ago now. And I just sat there and I heard him say those words, and I was like, oh my God, that rings so true to me. One of my challenges as an orthotist over the years is looking at AFOs, particularly for people with neurological problems, because they have all sorts of movement issues. And I've always hated AFOs that don't move. I remember doing a talk once that got me into not a bit of bother, but I got some heat because I said, why would you ever prescribe a rigid AFO, an AFO that doesn't move? But I was deliberately being a problem or a challenge. And the audience was full at the conference I was at when I did this presentation. It just doesn't make sense for the human ankle not to move. But the research has been around human ankles not moving and how do we make those people move well in controlled environments. And it's not real world. And I think we can do better. Whether the NHS will pay for it or not, I don't know. But the tech is now there for that. There is now evolving tech for that. And it does work. But yeah, there's certainly some challenges. But I also think there's massive opportunity. But I think the only way we're going to do that is be honest about what works, what doesn't, and use technology appropriately and safely.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing, and like looking at what you talked about previously, you talk about simplifying complex things, and I think that's brilliantly helpful. It's one of our values is keep it simple. And how do we simplify it? Because it's an absolute minefield in loads of different areas. So how do you keep it simple but complex enough for it to be relevant and useful?
Yeah, so there's the golden goose. There's the pipe dream. Um, from a personal point of view, the challenge is we all have biases. And when you're professional and you're qualified, you do things and it helps people. Okay, and so do we really understand how that intervention is working? Because I think sometimes we research is complicated. Research has to be focused, it has to be structured. But taking all of those different bits and pulling it together is one of my favorite things to do. Um, and it keeps me up for hours trying to figure out how to turn these things from complexity into simplicity. I think Albert Einstein's quote of if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough is there. I think we need to be starting simple and making it complicated as we learn more. But I think our communication with the people we treat or the clients we see or the professionals we interact with needs to be as clear as it can be and as simple as it can be to break down these problems into simple steps because then we can understand it with more clarity what works and what doesn't. Biomechanics is a complicated beast full of opinion and history and different institutions saying different things and different educational uh, institutions saying different things and having different beliefs. But there is some science in there, and I think the more consensus we have about the better. Hasn't really answered your question, but how do you do
No,
it?
well, again, I think of me like I've got a sports science degree, and but I am. If people really dig into any of my knowledge on our products, I don't understand diagnostic ultrasound, but we've got people like Sean or whoever that does understand it. Whereas I love simplicity. I love short emails. I love clear things, and it's like that's just the way I consume things. I like books that are broken down in very easy ways. And it's like I don't feel like I'm a simple person, but I just like simple things and I like to communicate in a simple way. But you do I got the backup that I know that my team do know that stuff or someone knows it. And I think sometimes you do see it where people try and explain something and you're like, I'm not sure you know what you're talking about here, and then you just lose credibility straight away.
And then you do also get the opposite, which is you get people who really do know what they're talking about. And some of those people, their written work is really hard to read. But when you see them present, they're amazing, and vice versa. I've seen it both sides of the coin. Um,
Mm.
it's really interesting. I think the solution to it, I firmly believe, needs to be a fundamental change in the way people are taught and the structure. So my degree, I'll talk about my own degree. What I was taught at university was a series of things I needed to do to get a result. You've got this, you get that. I wasn't taught why. Why do we do these things? Why do we have these problems? Why do we have this variation underpins everything? So I would introduce systematic processes into thinking and clinical reasoning and problem solving um, on day one at university. Problem solving skills, analytical skills, to be able to explain the process and have a systematic way of trying to break these things down. And I think that is possible with everything. Because if you don't do that, you end up sometimes with scenarios where people have a belief and they carry on doing what they've already done, but somebody else goes, well, that doesn't really work. And what you get is a separation of professionals rather than a bringing together and a collaborative working of professionals, because everyone has very sometimes fixed ideas about certain things. And if you want to talk about physiotherapy, you can look at manual therapy and acupuncture and all of that stuff. There are people clashing on those things all the time. And physio has gone down the load management route and patients are sometimes caught between what one professional says to them versus what another professional says to them, because they're both trying to come at it, but we're not necessarily understanding and being clear about the language we use or what we're telling people. So in the middle, we've got this person, which is a patient who is often in pain or has a problem. And it's no wonder they get anxious and confused with the variation of things they're told and what's done to them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it is really interesting, and that I do see that you can say, oh, they told you to do what? Oh, and it's just like it does my head in. Like when anyone comes round to your house and says, oh, who did your wiring? Oh, no, I don't like that. And it does create distrust in there, and I think we have got a responsibility to how we communicate around. Everyone is all ultimately trying to do the right thing, aren't they? And they're doing it with that belief.
But I think, and I think if we, not to be critical, well, I am being critical of the NHS. Well, my father was a nurse in the 1950s in England, and the big part of healthcare that I think we've lost within the NHS is the care part. I think we've been focusing on health, and the care part is the bit that is a challenge. The NHS has got incredibly busy, and have we got too bureaucratic, and have we got too many rules? We have to be safe, but I think there's a level of all of this stuff, and in the middle of it, we can't lose sight of these are individual people with complex, varying issues, and we need to, how many times do we have friends and family who go to see the doctor and they say, "What did they say?" "Oh, I'm not really sure." "What?" "What do you mean?" Or I'm a clinician, I treat lots of feet. People come in and say, "I've got a condition called plantar." And you just go, "Oh my God, who did you see?" What if people are coming in, they need to understand what their problem is, and we have to learn to communicate that better and simpler. And it all ties in together for me. Communication, systematic working, problem solving, simple language has to be the fundamental of every healthcare professional, and we have to have the time to care.
Yeah. No, I agree. So what made you talk about being at university, but like what made you want to go and study this?
That was I didn't is the answer. I was as a young man full of beans, as my father would say, and I didn't get serious about learning until it was probably too late to do what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a doctor. I always said I wanted to be a doctor as a kid. I always had this dream, I don't know where it came from, of transplanting the first ever human leg. Hasn't actually been done, but I reckon I could probably have a good crack at it with the right surgical colleagues and friends. But I think, yeah, I kind of fell into it because I failed my A-level mocks. University for medical school turned me down. I got my act together and taught myself my A-levels with some help from my friends and my tutors at school. Got the grades, medical school was full. And so one interview at Manchester Medical School, they said, "Why do you want to be a doctor?" And I said, "Orthopedics." And they said, "Well, have you heard of prosthetics and orthotics?" And not long later, I was sat at Salford University in the first cohort of the degree in 1992 of prosthetics and orthotics. And a lot of what I was taught there has subsequently been proven to be incorrect, but it was the foundation that we're based on. It's the place where you go from knowing nothing to knowing something, and that learning experience, I don't believe, ever ends. It's just it requires a lot of commitment and effort to try to keep up to speed with things, and I understand why some people struggle with that.
I think it's really interesting, isn't it? Like fundamentally, you're saying a lot of that stuff was wrong, but that if you haven't got what we've got now without having that, and I think there does seem to be a little bit of binary stuff
Yeah, so
sometimes.
I think the word wrong as well, it sounds a bit offensive to those people who have those ideas. So there's probably a better word I could have used for that. But it's an evolution, isn't it? So you have an idea, you test the idea, does it work, yes or no? And when it comes to feet, the big idea came in the 1970s from Root, Weed and Orion. They had a collection of ideas, science tested those ideas, and we learned that it wasn't quite what they said it was. The challenge is that people hang on to that belief. If that's what they know and what they believe and what their model is and what their modus operandi is in terms of treating patient, and they'll have patients that get better. The question is, how did they get better? And that's where science is explaining things differently now. But it's about being able to constantly evolve in the world, and I don't think we're great at doing that as institutions and professions. I think some people are better at that than others, and that's where I really enjoy trying to support clinicians along that journey in a comfortable way, because some people don't like reading complicated stuff, and break it down to its individual bits.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's a really helpful thing because it can be really overwhelming. Like you're talking about biomechanics. Like I've spent a fair bit of time with like Jim Richards up at Salford when he was
Yeah,
there, or Preston, and he's obviously absolutely amazing at what he does in communicating some of those things. But some of it, like Phil Graham Smith, I don't know if you know Phil. He was at Salford. You know, Phil's a good mate of mine, and he's like I love the way he talks, like very down to earth and
yeah,
normal, and makes it a bit more relatable for someone like me that's not, not well versed, particularly in that specialised biomechanical area. So, how do you think that education could be improved on it? Because I think, particularly in healthcare, I think it is it does quite stiff with the way that it does. It's very academic focused. Doesn't
yeah,
always take into that care element of it
yeah.
as well.
Yeah, so research says that implementing change into a healthcare system takes on average 17 years. Um, I think I think it's really difficult, because I think you've got different stages of learning and development and processes and cycles moving forwards. I think there needs to be far more emphasis on combined multidisciplinary education and communication between healthcare professionals. And I think that that should be a continuous journey of people wanting to work together in a supportive environment where you can understand these things, because there are some professionals who are talk about orthoses. There are some professionals who are really anti-orthoses, and there are some professionals who might prescribe too many orthoses. So there's the variation. I'm never going to prescribe an orthosis, can't stand the thing. Everyone's getting one. Okay, I doubt that there's anyone in the world saying everyone's getting one, but I'm just using the extreme examples. There's this space in the middle that loads and loads of people operate in, and people find it confusing because there's so many contradictory things out of there, and it's hard. We In my role now, that's exactly what we try to do. What we try to do is bring the evidence together and collate that together and present that and say, look, this is what research is telling us. This is the belief. This is what science says about the belief. And so I suppose another way of saying it is kind of, this is what we thought we knew. I remember at university, I had 2 lectures in one day from different people, and they were talking about the same thing. And they told me to do exactly opposite things. And I just thought, what the hell's that all about? So there's some stuff we thought we knew that's evolved, and science has taken those amazing ideas and turned it into things we now know. I think there's some stuff we think we know, but I don't think we should be scared of admitting there's stuff we don't know. And things that we don't know, which is the really interesting part. But I think the more we can work together to understand these things and share our knowledge and our frustrations, and also guide research so it's more real world, and try to encourage researchers to be maybe less clickbait in their titles of making these profound statements, of writing summaries which are clearer, and encouraging people to be better at reading things would be good. It's a paper comes out, how many people actually read all of the paper? And if they do read all of the paper, how many people actually get to the statistics part and sit there and have a look at the numbers and really delve into what the data's saying? There's probably too much focus on average, but you have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
There isn't a simple solution. My solution would be collaborative working and actually trying to better understand what we do. There are billions of people in the world, and I understand that there are commercial pressures, and there are some people who want to feed their own practice or build their professional profile or whatever that may be. But if we can't learn from each other better and communicate better, I think we're all losing out on skills that we all have, that we can all pick up things from other people.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things I've been into a couple of universities recently, back to where I studied as well, and it's like it's like, how do you bring that research bit into what I see on a daily basis of these clinical environments where they're seeing these things? How do you get that mix? And it's definitely, I haven't got any answers or solutions for how you do it, but considering it, how you do take all this amazing stuff that's going on, and it's like, right, well, so what? How does that really impact the patients and also the businesses of these people that are having to run a successful business?
Yeah, yeah, and I suppose one of the things that goes through my head when I read something, and I try to read as much as I can during a week, so probably 8 to 10 hours a week I spend reading at home, because I really love what I do, and I'm a bit of a geek. Um, I read something, and once I've got to the end of it, I'm kind of like, okay, so what does this mean? Do I need to do something different? Is it recommending I do something different? Is it disproving something? Is it proving something? And what does that actually mean? And I think that's where the crux of it. There are some people who are amazing at reading papers. There's some papers I have to sit down and read maybe 6, 7 times to be able to properly understand and digest them. It requires an amount of commitment. And I think that's where there could be something that brings this together and simplifies these things as a collaborative project, so that people, you sometimes come across a paper and someone reads it and gets opinion X and someone else gets opinion Y. Well, that's a problem. you know Science is about testing stuff, and two people shouldn't read the same paper and come to different conclusions. But if you understand where those conclusions come from, it's normally their own beliefs or their biases, or their lack of understanding of what they're seeing in front of them. It's
Mm.
complicated, and that's the summary bit. Human beings are bloody complicated, and we're all different. Um, so if you try to invoke a set of rules that say you should be doing this, you'll come up against things that will never meet that criteria. And I think that embracing variation has got to be at the core of everything, and understanding variation and accepting it. If human beings haven't figured out yet that we're different, then we're all idiots.
That could have been a good one to end on, but we won't end on that. What, in terms of like your work at Tailor Made, then talk to me about what you do there.
Okay, so I'm the medical director at Tailor Made. So we are a company who are trying to promote clinical excellence. So my job is really varied. I've got some amazing people I work with inside the organization, and lots of people we've worked with outside the organization. My job is basically to make sure that anything we do that has a clinical impact is safe and effective and works. So my remit is quality, R&D, product development, and training and education primarily. Because I'm a director of the business, I'm also responsible for business related things, but there are other people who do that more than me, but I work in with that sphere. So our focus, I suppose, is trying to come up with solutions that people need that are cost effective, and hopefully some things that people don't realize they do need. So it's been really nice over the last 6 years in particular to be able to develop a new range of insoles that we've got as an MSK toolkit, which we're getting amazing patient results back from and clinician results, and develop the education program around that. But also some of the things that are maybe a little bit less sexy but have a massive impact, like developing products to prevent people getting pressure ulcers. That's really complex and difficult, and dealing with the manufacturing and the development and the testing of those things. Back to the technology question you asked me earlier, using those tools in a way which is giving us indications of how these things work according to what we currently believe. There's probably some stuff we can't measure and we don't know, but based on the science that we do have, to ensure that the devices we make provide, whether they are pre-made, and most of what we do is pre-made, but the custom side of things is growing exponentially at the moment in terms of foot orthoses, making sure we're at the top of our game, really, and making sure that any single person in this organization realizes that there's a patient at the end of absolutely everything we do, and a clinician that we are there to support as much as we possibly can. And if we haven't got the answers, we'll go and find them from someone else, if they exist anywhere. So my job is really cool. I I have a career history where every 6 to 7 years I've changed jobs. I'm about to hit 11 years here at Tailor Made. I'm going to be here for an awful lot longer unless someone decides they don't want me. But um, I love every moment of coming to work and working with these amazing people, because we're doing stuff that really helps, and we'll continue trying to do that to the best of our ability.
Yeah, no, I'd love to come down and see the facility. Like one of my things that I'm really lucky, I get to go and see these really cool facilities, with people like you. So I'd love to come down and find out
Yeah,
a bit more about what you're doing. That'd be great.
yeah, you're more than welcome anytime. Well,
And then
assuming I'm
also,
here.
well, so I was looking on your LinkedIn, I thought it was quite interesting. So you've got this bit where you say three very simple rules in terms
Yeah.
of that. Like, well, what prompted that, and can you remember them?
Oh, that's a great question. So the rules are, for me, based on um, based on my beliefs. I think my father had a big influence on me as a person. He's an ex-army man. He was a male nurse when there were no male nurses, in the 50s and 60s. And my dad always brought me up to do my best. And we have a responsibility as clinicians when somebody comes into the room to deal with their problems, and that's a cost to clinicians that's not recognized enough. We spend all day with somebody else with a problem trying to help them get better, and you listen, and it can be emotionally draining and challenging. So rule number one is do your best. And I'm thinking exactly the words I use to these now. Number two is if you're not sure, ask. So basically, if you don't know a problem and you can't figure it out, try and figure it out and ask help. But there's a fundamental problem with evidence-based healthcare, that you get a publication that comes out and says, this is what you do, and like lemmings off a cliff, everyone follows it. Challenge the evidence. Don't be scared. If you see something and it makes sense, then you're probably right. So if you're not sure, ask. And rule number three is the most important one in the world, and that is enjoy it. Do it with a smile on your face. And that can be really difficult. But I think if we're sitting in a clinical environment, and I'm sitting in a busy clinic, and Tailor Made do deliver some NHS clinics under contract, when that next patient comes in the room, my job is to help them. And I need to greet them with warmth and compassion and with care. And I need to have a smile on my face and do my very best throughout the job. And if I come up against an obstacle, I need to find a solution. And that's kind of, it's the way I'm wired. I think it's partly in my DNA, but I think it's also as a leadership coach now, in terms of what I've done over my professional career and a lot of the training I've delivered nationally and internationally. It's about getting people to try to share that passion for, this is something which is challenging. It is enjoyable. You can achieve many, many wonderful things, but for crying out loud, enjoy it.
Yeah,
Because it's more than half your life is spent at work. So if you're not enjoying it, either find somewhere where you can enjoy it or go and do something else. Um,
yeah,
and for me, that makes me get up in the morning and want to carry on doing what I'm doing. And it's now much less patient facing, but everything I'm doing involves a patient in some way. And I still get an absolute buzz from hearing anybody turn around and go, yeah, I did something and it helped. And I was really pleased, and I feel much more confident. You're like, oh my God, that's amazing from a professional. And when you hear a patient saying, yeah, I saw this person, and do you know what? They didn't really do anything other than listen. And they gave me some tips about how I can manage the complexities that are going on in my life at the moment. And I feel like I'm more able to cope. That's amazing. We can change people's lives. And I see that as an honor and a privilege. And I think we've got to get the right systems in place to support staff to be able to continue to be able to deliver that. And that's part of my job at Tailor Made, to do that with our team.
yeah. No, bro. I mean, I think that last point about enjoying it, like it's so easy to you do to serious business. It is serious, but it's just why do you want to be serious all the time with this stuff? You've got to be professional with it, but
Oh,
just
no,
enjoy the thing.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But, I'm not sure if anyone else is there. I remember I got caught once by a patient, and I saw this old chap years ago. He had arthritis in the middle of his foot. and his wife had dementia, and they were retired farmers, and he'd been told he needed an operation on his foot. And I made him an insole, and this guy, and I broke all of the rules at the time in terms of what I should have done according to the theory of the time. And I was like, right, this hurts. I'm going to stop it moving as much. I'm going to go really aggressive rather than cushioning it. I'm going to go super aggressive, which is what the evidence now says. This guy turned up, gave him this insole inside his shoe. He stood up and he said, my foot doesn't hurt. And he burst into tears. As he walked out the door and he walked out the reception of the clinic in Oxford I was in, I did a knee slide in the middle of the corridor, and he caught me doing it because he'd left his cap on the desk in my office. That's a moment. The virtual knee slide is probably, or the one in your head is there. Celebrate the wins, because yeah, people are awesome. We just don't give ourselves credit. We deal with problems. We need to understand when we do things well, and we need to celebrate success when it happens.
Definitely. Look, that's an amazing place to finish. I fully agree with that. You should reflect and really appreciate the stuff, that the amazing impact that healthcare professionals are making. So, Simon, I really appreciate it. I love your enthusiasm, and well done for being put on the spot and dealing with those things. That was good. And I'm looking forward to coming and seeing your setup. It sounds amazing.
Fabulous. All right, Andy, thanks a lot.
Thank you.